All right. First rule of this channel, we do not talk about this channel. Second rule of this channel, this is not legal advice. So, in the movie World War Z, there's this one scene where Brad Pitt's character is talking to an Israeli secret agent, and they're talking about how Israel got attacked, and I think it's the 6 Day War, something like that. And the idea is that if 10 people agree, Israel came up with a plan where the 10th one, it was their duty to disagree, i.e., in the case of fantasy football, if you want the same outcome as everybody else, you need to think the same way as everybody else. If you want a different outcome, you need to have, you have to disagree with other people. And in the case, like when I'm coming up with my projections, there are certain points where I know I'm being a contrarian because I need to have a different point of view in order to win my league. I also realize that like just because everybody else is doing something doesn't mean that it's necessarily right. And in the case of fantasy football, like when we're looking at drafting people, there's a common misconception that we're trying to draft last year's production. In reality, what I'm trying to do is predict this year's production, and I need to factor in both the risk and the upside of a player. And they're going to get massive at certain points, like the gulf between what they could do theoretically and man, if all those other things go the wrong way, how bad that guy can hurt me, even without injuries going on. So I think I can move on from your World War Z. There's two things that happened in the news today so far. One thing happened yesterday. One of them just happened. I moved Isaiah Pacheco up right now in my running back rankings from 9 to 8. He knocked Zamir White down. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire re-signed with the Chiefs for 1 year, and this actually moves Pacheco up because the chances that the Chiefs go out and bring another guy in are probably lower now because of the signing of Clyde. CEH is probably going to take on that 20% role and allow there's a bigger possibility that Pacheco is going to be that bell cow, that 70-80% guy with the good work. So that would move him up a little bit just because this one signing probably means the Chiefs are going to be less aggressive in the draft. They're probably going to be less aggressive going out there trying to, pick up a Jarrett McKinnon type guy. So this would actually move Pacheco up a little bit in my board. And the other thing is overall, the offense probably gets a slight upgrade. The other thing is Carson Wentz signed with the Chiefs, and this helps their pass receivers. It helps basically everybody. So this is another like a little insurance thing that like if we had two players that were of equal value and the backup quarterback for team B was of less quality than the Carson Wentz, then that tiebreaker of what are the chances that a Garrett Wilson's going to happen this year when Aaron Rodgers goes down is a little bit lower. And this is not to say that I think Carson Wentz is necessarily good. I think he's serviceable from an NFL perspective, but that slot of games that could be the difference between making playoffs or getting that bye week. This could be the difference between that. So I would tend to marginally move up, like your Travis Kelce's, your Hollywood Browns, and definitely Rashee Rice. And we're going to talk about Rashee Rice here in a second. So when I talk about like ranges of outcomes for players and how we have to be able to factor in, well, I didn't say I have to factor in their potential upsides. And I talked about this yesterday with the Michael Thomas season. So all the way back in, 2018, I actually downgraded Michael Thomas in my pre-draft and with one of my co-owners, and I said, yeah, I'm not really comfortable drafting Michael Thomas because the only thing that he can do is after doing this 147 targets, 125 and 1,400 yards with 9 touchdowns is you have a league winning or a record breaking league winning year. So he 185 targets, and this is in the 16 games, 185 targets. 149 receptions, 17, 25, and 9 touchdowns. So I actually downgraded him based off the fact that I didn't think that this legendary season was within his range of outcomes. And now when I look at players, I have to factor in that legendary possibility that a guy has to just break a league because of that upside. So when I start building my rankings for players, I take that into account with guys. That what are the chances that they can win me a league, or what are the chances that they're just going to be a very solid player? And sometimes, like I'll actually downgrade guys that are less risky because they just don't have the upside to win me a league. I'm not trying to come in third place in my fantasy football league. That's not the goal. The goal is to embarrass my opponents, right? So the one thing I'm going to talk about is AJ Brown. He's my wide receiver 10 right now. He's a wide receiver too. If you're following the channel before, these guys that split targets, I downgrade because I know that week's going to come at the wrong time. Like that week 17 outing that's a sub 40-degree day that can like lose me a league. I'll downgrade a player. So in the case of AJ Brown, you see that like he had 158 targets, 106 receptions for 1,456 yards and 7 touchdowns. The idea behind why I would downgrade AJ Brown to a high end wide receiver 2, he's wide receiver 10 overall. I think there's only 9 draftable wide receiver 1s at this point, is because the road for him to get to this Michael Thomas season, 185 targets, 149 receptions, 1,700 yards and 9 touchdowns, is very difficult. From his expectation that he finished as wide receiver 7. So I have him ranked as wide receiver 10 because there is within his range of outcomes he can hit, wide receiver, 9, 8, 7, 6. He finished as wide receiver 5 2 years ago. That's still within his range of outcomes. Like that would be a good value pick if I took him at wide receiver 10. He finishes again as wide receiver 5. Hey, I just won. With the capital I put in, if I go out and I draft an AJ Brown, and I bring this up because I was looking at the rankings again. AJ Brown wide receiver 6, and then AJ Brown for Fantasy Pros is wide receiver 6, 12th overall. There's no upside to that. Like he can't win me a league. I'm just drafting to get my heart broken, and I just don't like that from a player. And we can actually break it down because like when we look at a Jalen Hurts, he played all 17 games last year. He had 538 attempts, 352, 3,800 yards passing, 23 touchdowns. He had another 15 on the ground. Those are 15 touchdowns that don't go to AJ Brown, right? That AJ Brown's likely not to get. So even if we look at a touchdown regression from Jalen Hurts, it becomes very difficult. Well, how many of those touchdowns are going to go to AJ Brown from what he did last year? 7. Like maybe he gets to 11. But the overall passing offense is just not going to support AJ Brown getting the possibility of moving into 1,700, 1,800 yards that needs to be into that legendary season. It's just not going to happen. And that's on top of the targets that he has to get to. It's like 180 to 200 targets to have those legendary seasons. And it's just like, well, how much blood can we get out of AJ Brown next year? And it's going to be very difficult, especially like when we look at like a Devontae Smith, that the idea behind him coming out of that 2020 season, and I downgraded Devontae Smith last year. He finishes wide receiver 10 in 2022, 136 targets. He drops to 112. Like you get that flop going on in Philadelphia, which I would, there's enough value in Devontae Smith to expect that flip to occur this year where AJ Brown goes from wide receiver 7 to wide receiver 12, and Devontae Smith goes from wide receiver 20 to wide receiver 10. That's a range of outcomes that you can kind of maybe potentially end up betting on. And then Devontae Smith gets that 140, 150 targets that AJ Brown got last year, and you just flop the two guys. And the value is not in drafting an AJ Brown as your wide receiver 6. It's going AJ Brown's wide receiver 10. Devontae Smith has upside at wide receiver, and I can look this up really quick, showing again how amazingly prepared I am. I'll use ESPN because I'll probably be able to find him easily. So Devontae Smith is wide receiver 22. There's more value drafting Devontae Smith as wide receiver 22 to be like a flex wide receiver 3, low end wide receiver 2 than there is to draft AJ Brown and expecting him to have this Michael Thomas, elite legendary season of 185 targets and 149 receptions, 1,700 yards, 9 touchdowns. Like there's like that season based off the value he went. I think this year, this draft, he was like wide receiver 4 overall, like built into the player as opposed to the other way around with trying to guess that on a AJ Brown. And again, this is before I even get to how many, if Barkley's used in the passing game. So again, like, if you're upgrading your Saquon Barkley ranking, you're automatically also having to downgrade your AJ Brown ranking, right? And with Dallas Goedert still in the mix, like it's like, well, how not good is Dallas Goedert going to be off of 14 games, 83 targets, 59 receptions, 592 and 3 touchdowns? Like Is there going to be Dallas Goedert? Like, this is the year to bet Dallas Goedert goes, not good. Or is this the year that we go, hey, I think that there's value in going after Dallas Goedert, because that's going to disproportionately affect AJ Brown. So the same thing that I talk about with like the Clyde signing probably moves Isaiah Pacheco slightly up the board. You have to factor this stuff in when making rankings for guys. Like it's and I don't like using like projected stats, because there's no point to it. Like I'm projecting off of the over underline what they did the year before. I'm projecting up or I'm projecting down based off with like where I would be putting him at. So like with CeeDee Lamb, and this is the only guy that I think competes with your Breece Halls and your CMCs. Probably like the number 3 overall on my draft board with CeeDee Lamb, and I talked about his stats yesterday: 181 targets, 135, 1,749, and 12 touchdowns. Like that Michael Thomas line from a few years ago, like what I have to factor in, like, what are the chances that CeeDee Lamb has that legendary season based off of where he's going in the draft? I think that there's enough there. The Michael Gallup being cut, all the other things that are going on in Dallas, I think there's enough blood to get out of CeeDee Lamb based off those stats, because I could go look up Dallas and the other guys that they have there. Like they're going to bring back Brandon Cooks. Maybe there's a slight bump in targets for Brandon Cooks coming back in the second year. That's not going to downgrade CeeDee Lamb overall on his stat line. He may not finish as wide receiver 1, but he's probably still has that like wide receiver 6 from 2022 built into him. So again, there's enough safety there taking CeeDee Lamb and going like, he still could win me a league because he's got that legendary upside. But his downside is like, I just have a solid wide receiver 1. Like that's a good thing to be looking at from how I'm ranking guys overall. So moving on to that second tier, like I have Garrett Wilson here, and because as I talked about before, like the two guys that he's going to be competing with for targets in the Jets offense are going to be Mike Williams, if he's healthy, and Breece Hall. Like I'm not really worried about Tyler Conklin. I'm not really worried about anybody else at this point. So the 168 targets, maybe they're a little bit more efficient. I talked about this like yesterday, but all in all, like there's probably going to be a spike in touchdowns. And again, I have to factor in like, not that I think Garrett Wilson is wide receiver 2 overall. It's what are the chances that Garrett Wilson has that legendary season based off of where he's going in the draft. So if he's going as my wide receiver 2, yeah, he can still break my heart. He finishes like wide receiver 7, provided that, Aaron Rodgers can still stay healthy. But at the same time, like trying to guess on the guy who's going to have that legendary upside season is something that probably should be built into how you're viewing your players, like how I view the players when I go to drafting them. And again, this is not hey, I'm going to draft Garrett Wilson like 4 overall in the draft. That's again not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is like I can take some other people's boards, like Draft Bros, and I can go find a Garrett Wilson. And I think I did see him earlier. Garrett Wilson, 18 overall, wide receiver 10. So like probably a second round draft pick, and I would go like, yeah, I could probably get a lot of blood out of that stone at wide receiver, 10 overall, 18 overall, wide receiver 10. There's a lot there to potentially get out of Garrett Wilson, because yeah, I could see him finishing based off what's going on with New York, the Jets. I could see him finishing as wide receiver 1 overall and having that CeeDee Lamb, Michael Thomas type of season, like that Megatron type of season. Like I could see those things occurring. It has to be built into the player. So there's, how much competition for opportunity there is, but like, what are the upside for a guy? And again, the other guy I have right now I'm looking at Puka as my wide receiver 3. And it's because, yeah, I'm expecting Cooper Kupp to take that step back. I could pull up Cooper Kupp. I could expect Cooper Kupp's going to take that age-related step back. It's really hard to kind of project what he's going to do out there this year after 95 targets in only 12 games, after basically having a lot of injury. But the thing is with if I'm going to downgrade Cooper Kupp, that means I'm going to upgrade Puka. And after, as a rookie, having those 160 targets, even if Cooper Kupp can magically rebound to form, it's like, okay, how much is this going to hurt Puka? I'm going to be at about 140 targets going into the season. So maybe he's not a top end wide receiver 1. Can I see that, that spike in the player for Puka, hitting that 180, 200 targets in a season, that efficiency going up, yeah, that's probably there. But if I downgrade him, what am I going to get? Like wide receiver 10 overall, and I'm drafting him, as my wide receiver 3. So that would be like a mid first round draft pick, and I could go find where he would be ranked someplace else and go, well, he's only wide receiver 7 on ESPN. Like that, I would think that there's value in the pick in a ESPN type league. So that would be the idea behind all this to move on from. So the two guys, and I talked about these guys yesterday, and I have Davante Adams right now listed as wide receiver 4. I'll do the full rankings at the end of the week and go over these guys. But again, this is an age-related thing. I have to be able to go, well, where are these targets not going to come from? This is going to be a thing with Davante Adams. I will probably downgrade him slightly if Aiden O'Connell is going to start the season as a quarterback. If Gardner Minshew wins the job, I think there's a little bit more stability in Davante Adams. 175 targets. Like I said, I don't think Jacoby Myers is going to get those targets. Maybe Trey Tucker eats into him a little bit. The guy that I would be looking, if you're looking at downgrading your Davante Adams shares, the guy that I would be looking at having that complement to those loss of targets would probably second-year tight end Michael Mayer. And again, tight ends can't lose me a league; they can only win me a league. So again, targeting this guy to potentially take over from Davante Adams as that age-related shift occurs. And this is a little high for me at wide receiver 4 overall for Davante. Let me roll up my my overall rankings. It's a little high for me to have Davante as wide receiver 4. And again, this is the difference between Tyreek Hill potentially getting downgraded because of age, and then the targets potentially having to go someplace else, which I would say like the younger Jalen Waddle. So I am going to upgrade Jalen Waddle overall in the stats. There's a corresponding response to this. I think I have, let me look this up. I think I have Jalen Waddle as wide receiver 15 right now because of the opportunity that he would have to flop the production of him and Tyreek Hill. That's why I would have him up so high. So these guys are still up high. I'm not downgrading, saying like, oh, like it's a fluke season, I'm going to downgrade this guy overall. I'm less interested in drafting Tyreek Hill because, again, if I'm looking at Fantasy Pros where they would have Tyreek Hill's 3 overall, wide receiver 2, I don't know how you would put him there and not go, well, I need to factor in an age-related decline. So I'm downgrading Davante Hill, to wide receiver 5, or excuse me, Tyreek Hill to wide receiver 5 based off of his age. And again, it still has the legendary upside built into it. It also has the fact that he could have a down year off of that. And then this next group of guys like Chase, Jamar, and the Sun God. Jamar Chase, he has to be above Justin Jefferson because of the quarterback situation. Sam Darnold being the asterisk. He's still going to be competing with targets with T. Higgins. I actually probably should have pulled this up before I got here, and I will do it now because I was thinking about this when I was getting ready to get the video done. Is I don't know what the overall Bengals roster situation is going to be like, and we were following Trenton Irwin and Iosivas last year, and I could see those guys also being a part of the game. So like T. Higgins, Iosivas back, Trenton Irwin's right now is on the roster. So like I could definitely see they're getting ready for potentially a post T. Higgins team construction, and I could see those guys potentially eating into a T. Higgins one way or another. So they were both already doing that. Iosivas is the guy I think is going to end up being the heir apparent to the T. Higgins spot. So again, there's enough there with Jamar Chase in Cincinnati that I would be a little concerned with him having that legendary upside. And that's the biggest reason why I would downgrade him overall, as I try and pull up the Justin Jefferson to get ready for this, if I can. And it doesn't seem like it wants to be particularly helpful. So anyway, that's kind of what we're looking at. There he is. So with Justin Jefferson, the downgrade is Sam Darnold. It's what are the chances that we can get that legendary season? I remember 2022 when we were drafting him as the number 1 overall in drafts. It's based off the 184 targets, 128 receptions, 1,800 yards and 8 touchdowns. And then we're thinking that there's possibility that he could have that legendary season off of that. That's still already pretty close to a legendary season, but we're expecting that there's upside built into that. Plus, we have to look at the risk. And right now, like with Sam Darnold as a starting quarterback, like I don't think that's necessarily a huge downside. But we're also looking at competition for targets between Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson. So that's why I would probably end up ranking Justin Jefferson, I think, as my wide receiver 7 overall going into the draft. And there's no way, if I value Justin Jefferson as wide receiver 7, he's ranked at ESPN wide receiver 5. I'm sure Fantasy Pros is going to have him. He's wide receiver 3 overall, 5. I'm saying that if I'm in a league and I have if I'm in a Fantasy Pros league and it's I have the 5th overall pick, I probably would be going in a different direction from Justin Jefferson. If I'm in another league and Justin Jefferson, like I said, I think that Justin Jefferson should be an early 2nd round pick. That's where I think he should probably end up going in drafts. If I have that early 2nd round pick, I'm smashing that. That's too easy. So the only time this really matters in a snake draft is if I have that late 2nd and Justin Jefferson starts falling to me at that point, and then it's just like I'm taking a guy at value. I'm not getting a lot of risk. I'm not getting a lot of reward. That's still a pretty good pick overall. So that would be the thought process behind where I put that guy. We'll get to Rashee Rice, and then to finish with the with Amon-Ra. Again, this is just another thing. He's going to be a flawed player. He's not going to probably have the ability to really push up too much more than he did, especially with the targets that are going to be going around there, or the competition for targets that's going to be going on in Detroit. So for him to get up to that 17, 18, 1,900 yard season, 20 touchdowns, pushing towards 150 receptions, which is what you have to be looking at to win a league. Getting the upside of the player. It's a hard road to telling the story where Amon-Ra is able to do that. It's not to say that it's impossible. It's just saying if I'm going to bet on a Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson, that's why I have them ranked above. I think Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams, like you're drafting Tyreek's 2023 season. You're expecting the lack of competition with Devontae Adams and the potential for an upgrading quarterback for Devontae Adams as my wide receiver 4. Like Puka, it's just like he did it as a rookie. Maybe we have to already factor in that positive progression. And same thing with Garrett Wilson. I'm betting on talent there with the upgraded quarterback position. And again with the Sun God, like you're looking at drafting wide receiver 7 or 8. 1, 2, 3. You're looking at drafting wide receiver 8 and getting wide receiver like 8. Like that's probably what you're looking at doing. And then to finish off this road, I have 2 guys. So the first guy is Michael Pittman. I believe he's my wide receiver 9 overall. And again, 156 targets last year. That's coming off of 141. And this is with that bad quarterback play. Factoring in the range of outcomes for Michael Pittman attached to Anthony Richardson. Yeah, is there the possibility that you're looking at a guy that could have that 180, 190 target season? Probably. That's why he should, in my opinion, he's the number one. The closest thing that he's going to have the competition for opportunity is Josh Downs. The other thing is the touchdown competition, probably a little bit more against him overall, having that high touchdown season. But again, the overall type Michael Thomas season should be factored into his range of outcomes. That's why I would have him as my wide receiver 9. And if he disappoints me as wide receiver 9 and he finishes at wide receiver 15, it's not going to kill me. And the biggest thing behind all this is when I go hunt him down in a draft, like wide receiver 11, I'm in line with ESPN, so I'm not going to get a lot of value there. And then I just pull up the other random sites when I look this stuff up to try and see where they have guys ranked. If I have value. So in a Fantasy Pros league, and you got to know your league. Like he is an absolute steal going as wide receiver 21, 40, 44 overall. Like I don't even think that's hyperbole based off of like me overvaluing these guys versus the potential for a high upside season. And then all jokes aside with Rashee Rice, this has to be factored into his upside is this second half of the season where he's getting like the 10-9, 10-9, 12 targets to go along with 5 and 6. There's also the good possibility that you're looking at Travis Kelce having an age-related decline. And this is something that I already factored into him last year when he finishes wide receiver 3. He started the season injured. He's going to be 35. Like it's a hard road to see how he doesn't decline, and then there has to be a corresponding reaction to that, which would be Rashee Rice. Maybe Hollywood Brown caps the overall upside of Rashee Rice, but again, this is going to be more of a PPR guy, and if he was able to do 102 targets over the course of the 16 games that he played last year, and that's basically being a part-time player for the first half of the year. That spike in snap share didn't happen until week 14. So like there's enough there with Rashee Rice to go like, hey, yeah, I have to be expecting that there's a possibility to have a legendary upside season. He's my wide receiver 9 or 10. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He's my wide receiver 10 right now. So that would be the idea behind all of this. And again, like some of these guys, like the overall whatchamacallit, the legal situation with Rashee Rice could change him a little bit. Overall, some of the other guys, there may be a guy that's brought into some of these places that might change my opinion. I could maybe see the biggest one that I would be expecting, maybe a change to, is maybe the Raiders bring in a more well-rounded wide receiver 2 than Jacoby Myers. That would be the biggest one that I would maybe be expecting. I don't really expect the Colts to go put that money in there. So like overall, I don't know how much these guys are going to be changing too much. The guys that I will be looking at talking about like tomorrow would be like AJ Brown, Drake London, DJ Moore, Deontay going to the Panthers. Like those are the guys that I think they have legendary upside in their range of outcomes. They also have like massive disappointment written into them also. So anyway, that's about all I got today. And sometimes you got to just disagree with other people if you want to win a league.